Rogue One, a Star Wars story, posting the second biggest December opening weekend ever, making an estimated $155 million in theaters in the US and Canada. Last year's Star Wars The Force Awakens, of course, holds the record for the largest December opening weekend with $248 million. Joining us now for more on Disney's strategy of spinning new stories and characters off the sci-fi classic is Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Intelligence Director of North American Research. Paul, great to talk to you. The question in 2012 when Disney paid $4 billion, and it was the $4 billion question back then for Lucasfilm, was, is this money well spent? It seems to be, doesn't it, Paul?
It really does. I mean, Bob Iger and the Disney team have, really made a great strategy on the film side by buying into, inherent strong franchises with first Pixar, then Marvel, and then most recently with Lucasfilms. And so now we have two Star Wars films kind of out in the marketplace, both have performed extraordinarily well. And, this sees no end in sight. So what was interesting about this film is they introduced a whole new set of characters. This was a set of characters that the market was not familiar with, yet they still had a very, very strong opening weekend globally, which really bodes well for the franchise long term.
Are we facing Star Wars overkill, Paul? There's 4 more films due to be released through 2020. You've got 4 Marvel superhero films, I think, in fiscal 2018 as well. Is it Marvel Star Wars overkill, saturation point?
We haven't seen it yet, and I know a lot of investors have stepped back and say, gee, is there a superhero overkill? Is there a sequel overkill? Or where are some of the fresh ideas? But the reality is, I think for these Hollywood moguls, sitting in their offices in Hollywood, all they see is this huge global box office from a lot of these franchises, and there is absolutely no reason to stop putting them out into the marketplace because they play not only well here in the U.S., but also around the world, and that is really clearly where the global film business is going, is international.
And Paul, I'm just curious also, just sort of personally, as someone who grew up with Star Wars, I'm curious demographically if we know about who the newer movies are appealing to. Is it people of my generation who grew up with Star Wars who feel that nostalgia? Is it attracting enough new fans to sort of keep it going? Do we have information on that?
Well, The Force Awakens, which was the first film that Disney came out with, really did appeal to an older demo, the demo that was familiar with the Star Wars characters. What was interesting about this film, again, it was a whole new set of characters that were outside kind of the mainstream from the first 6-movie set. And so we're starting to see younger demos on the opening weekend, which really bodes well for Disney and Star Wars as they think about expanding this cast of characters in this franchise and these titles over a broader universe. And what's also interesting is these characters generally who were not really developed outside of the U.S. that well in the 70s and 80s. These movies are performing well globally as well, including China, so that's big.
And obviously Star Wars is this enormous Leviathan hype machine and gets a lot of attention. Is it sort of pay a lot of attention to Star Wars, don't pay so much attention to ESPN? I mean, how much does this offset the ESPN issue?
Well, it has in part for the stock. I mean, the stock is now back over $100. It traded as low as 90 just several months ago. So I think what it does is just kind of highlights once again for a lot of investors the diversification of this company. It's not just a cable network business with ESPN, which although that clearly is still the main driver of the company and the stock, but the film business is also, really, if you look over the next 5 years, really in great shape. Parks and resorts are doing very well, but clearly Disney has to get a handle on ESPN and try to show the street that it can become a growth story once again.